My headlights carved a path through the swirling snow, then froze on a lone figure. Frost glazed his coat, breath puffing in ghostly clouds around his neck. Logic screamed to drive on. My heart slammed the brakes against that warning. I yanked open the door and offered him refuge from the storm. The storm that night felt alive, as if the wind had teeth and the snow claws. My tires hissed across an icy sheet, wipers thrashing desperately to clear even a glimpse of the road. All I wanted was to reach home, my tiny house, the heater waiting, the safety of walls that could keep this blizzard out. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles white with strain. Then I saw him. At first I thought it was a trick of the storm, a shadow cast by my headlights. But no, it was a man. He moved unevenly, half stumbling, half dragging his body forward as if gravity itself had turned against him. His frame hunched beneath a heavy coat, the once fine fabric now soaked and ruined. His head drooped, his steps sluggish. Every instinct screamed at me to keep driving, to pretend he was just another ghost swallowed by the night. But my heart betrayed me. I slowed, hazard lights blinking in weak rhythm against the snow's fury. The moment my car stopped, he lifted his head. Gray eyes locked onto mine through the storm, wide and hollow. His lips were cracked, his breath spilling in broken plumes. The door handle felt frozen beneath my grip, but I yanked it anyway, stepping out into the howling wind. "Hey!" I shouted above the storm. "You okay?" No response. I dashed to the trunk, grabbed the spare wool coat I always kept for emergencies, and hurled it toward him. He stared at it like it was a weapon, suspicion clouding his gaze. I didn't wait for his decision. I reached for his arm, ice cold through the soaked sleeve, and pulled him toward the car. The moment the door slammed shut, the world changed. Outside, the wind still roared, but inside, warmth pushed back against death's grip. I shoved the coat over his shoulders, then turned the heater full blast. He collapsed into the seat, trembling so violently I worried his bones might crack. "Here," I said, fumbling with the thermos. I poured steaming tea into a cup and pressed it into his hands. His fingers shook, nearly spilling it, but somehow he brought it to his lips. Steam curled across his face, and for the first time I saw color return to his cheeks. "Thank you," he rasped, voice like broken glass. I studied him more closely under the dome light. The coat he'd worn wasn't cheap. It had once been finely tailored. But the seams frayed, the fabric torn, the dignity stripped away by frost and time. His shoes were worse, cracked leather exposing chilled skin. This was no ordinary wanderer. "Where were you headed?" I asked, trying to mask my concern with casual tone. His gaze drifted to the storm outside. "Nowhere," he whispered, words stiff, unconvincing. I wanted to press him, but his exhaustion silenced me. Instead, I pulled a blanket from the back seat and wrapped it around him. "You're coming with me," I said. "My place isn't far." He didn't argue. The rest of the drive passed in silence, save for the hiss of the heater and the moan of wind. I glanced at him often, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm, his grip tight on the cup as though it tethered him to life. By the time we reached my driveway, snow had buried half the walkway. I helped him inside, slamming the door against the storm. Warmth cocooned us instantly, the soft hum of the heater, the faint glow of a lamp left on. I led him to the couch, piled blankets around him, and handed him another drink. He sipped slowly, shoulders sinking into the cushions. For a moment, he seemed less like a stranger, and more like a man fighting ghosts only he could see. My curiosity burned. Who was he? Why here? Why like this? Finally, he broke the silence. "My name is Daniel," he said. His voice steadied. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a soaked business card, and placed it carefully on the table. The gold-embossed emblem gleamed. Vance Industries. My chest tightened. The name was monumental, known worldwide. I glanced from the card to his weary eyes, disbelief swirling with dread. You gave me shelter when I had nothing, he said, voice heavy, deliberate. Now I need you to trust me, because tomorrow everything changes. He looked up, eyes shining with resolve and fear. Meet me at dawn, he whispered, lips close to mine. Outside, the storm's final gust rattled the windows. I pressed my hand to the card, heart pounding. At sunrise, my life and his empire would collide. Steam curled from our cups, fogging the windshield glass as if the world itself were exhaling its own sorrow. He spoke in a voice rough as gravel and distant, each syllable fractured by betrayal. He described glass towers and boardroom battles, empires built on ambition and razed by treachery in a single night. I listened, heart pounding, as his truth unfolded like a city skyline dissolving in a winter storm. The cabin filled with a fragile silence, broken only by the hiss of the heater and the faint rattle of wind outside. My cup of tea steamed in my hands, the vapor rising like ghosts of warmth in a frozen world. He sat beside me, hunched, the wool blanket pulled close, eyes fixed on the fogged glass. His chest rose and fell unevenly, as though every breath cost him more than he could spare. Finally, his voice cracked the silence. I wasn't always this way, he murmured, tone brittle. There was a time when my name alone could open doors across the globe. Now, those same doors are locked. I leaned closer, uncertain. Who locked them? He turned, his eyes haunted, but burning with memory. The very people I trusted most. His words carried the weight of collapse. He told me of Vance, Industries, how he had built it from humble beginnings into a sprawling empire of technology, energy, and influence. He painted scenes of boardrooms filled with applause, investors clamoring for his vision, journalists writing his name like it was carved into steel. But the story shifted quickly, shadows rising. It happened overnight, he said, fists clenching against his knees. I was blindsided. Two of my closest partners orchestrated a coup. They forged documents, fabricated scandals, turned the board against me. In a single meeting, I went from CEO to exile. I swallowed hard, trying to imagine the freefall from power to nothing. They stripped you of everything? He nodded slowly. Accounts frozen, access revoked, my home sealed. Even my personal security detail replaced with men who turned their backs on me. He shook his head, bitterness hardening his voice. In one night, they erased me as if I'd never existed. The heater hummed, pushing warmth through the cabin, but the weight of his story chilled me deeper than the storm outside. I could see it in his face, the exhaustion not just of cold, but of betrayal. I wandered the streets, he continued, voice cracking. Tried to call in favors, but every line went dead. Friends who once toasted with me at galas wouldn't answer my calls. Journalists who once begged for my quotes printed lies instead. I was a ghost in my own city. He lifted the paper cup, steam clouding his features. Do you know what it feels like to be surrounded by millions, yet utterly alone? My throat tightened. Yes, I whispered. Different circumstances maybe, but yes. Our eyes met in the fogged reflection of the window, and for a heartbeat the distance between CEO and stranger collapsed. He wasn't an empire. He was just a man, broken by betrayal. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a soaked envelope, edges curling from the storm. With trembling hands, he slid out an embossed invitation, the gold foil glimmering even under the dim dome light. Across the top, Cordelia Vance, founder and CEO, Vance Industries. My heart stuttered. Cordelia, he nodded. That's me. My given name. They took Daniel Hawthorne, the man I became, and tried to bury him. But Cordelia Vance remains, and tomorrow morning they expect me at a meeting, one they think I won't attend. I stared at the invitation, the letters blazing like a beacon and a curse. And you want me there? Yes, he said, his voice low but urgent. Because you saw me as a person when no one else would. I can't fight this battle alone. Not anymore. The storm raged outside, snow lashing the windows, but inside the car, time seemed to slow. His confession wasn't just a story. It was a plea, a bridge between survival and redemption. I exhaled slowly, my breath fogging the windshield. Then we face it together. His hand covered mine, trembling but warm. A flicker of resolve lit, his face, fragile but fierce. At dawn, he said, gripping the invitation, we begin reclaiming what they stole. He pressed my hand, eyes glinting with determination and fear. Meet me at dawn, and we begin the fight to reclaim what was lost. My breath hitched as I nodded, a single word forming on my tongue. Deal. Outside, the storm's fury rose once more, as though in challenge. Tomorrow I would step into the highest echelons of power, or risk being frozen out entirely. I stepped into a cathedral of steel and light, my breath stolen by its sheer scale. Security scanners buzzed in cold harmony, cameras tracking my every move. Executives paused mid-conversation as she appeared, impeccable, unflinching, all-knowing. My streetwise instincts collided with corporate power in that silent, polished lobby. Dawn broke with a pale fire across the city, the streets still wet from the storm. I clutched the gold-foiled invitation tighter than my own breath, afraid it might vanish like a dream. As the cab pulled up to the glass towers of Vance Industries, my pulse quickened. The building loomed like a monument to ambition, 40 stories of mirrored steel, catching the rising sun in sharp angles. The revolving doors whooshed as I stepped inside. At once, the chaos of the city dissolved into a world of marble floors, chrome columns, and polished perfection. The lobby stretched like a cathedral, every surface reflecting light in cold brilliance. I froze for a moment, swallowed by its grandeur. A row of security scanners beeped in sequence, each sound echoing through the cavernous space. Cameras swiveled silently, locking onto me as if I were already guilty of trespass. I placed the invitation against the reader. A soft glow signaled approval, and the glass turnstile slid open. Executives in tailored suits passed me, their polished shoes clicking across marble. Their conversations halted when they noticed me. Jeans, thrifted coat, a stranger out of place. Their stares weighed on me, but I pushed forward, determined not to falter. An escalator lifted me toward a mezzanine, the glass balustrades reflecting fragmented versions of myself. I thought of last night, the storm, the tea, the shivering figure who had confessed his truth. And now, here I was, carrying his secret into a fortress built on power. The corridor above was silent, lined with frosted glass offices and sleek lighting. My directions were simple. Turn left at the second hall. Continue to the end. My steps echoed on the soft carpet, each one a reminder of how far I stood from my world of small jobs and unpaid bills. At the end of the hall, a door slid open. She appeared. Cordelia Vance. Her presence filled the space like a force of nature. A navy suit tailored with perfect precision, auburn hair swept into a chignon, her gaze sharp and commanding. Yet behind the steel, I glimpsed the exhaustion of the storm, the vulnerability she'd let me see when frost clung to her. Lashes. "Thank you for coming," she said, extending a gloved hand. Her grip was firm, warm, undeniably human. I nodded, unsure if words would betray me. She motioned toward her office, a vast corner chamber lined with glass walls. The city sprawled below, streets glinting like veins of light in the early sun. We sat across a marble desk, the silence charged. An orchid rested in a crystal vase, its pale petals too perfect to be real. Cordelia steepled her fingers, eyes never leaving mine. "You stood by me in the storm," she said quietly. "Now I ask you to stand by me in fire." Before I could respond, she tapped a tablet. A panel slid open in the wall, revealing a massive digital screen. At once, the room darkened, the screen flashing red warnings. Critical breach detected. Lines of code streamed across, punctuated by flashing error messages. Camera feeds appeared, masked figures moving with precision through server rooms. Sparks flew as cables were yanked. My chest tightened. Cordelia's jaw clenched. They've breached our infrastructure. If they reach the core servers, every project, every partnership, every life tied to this company collapses. The words rang like a verdict. This wasn't just business, it was survival. I rose instinctively. What do we do? She looked at me, steel softening for the briefest moment. We fight back. Together, alarms echoed faintly beyond the office walls. Security doors hissed shut in the corridors. Cordelia moved to the console, summoning her team. The polished calm of her office fractured, replaced by the raw urgency of war. And me, a stranger who'd offered a coat on the roadside? Now I stood inside the Empire's heart, bracing to defend it. The screen blinked to a new message. Intruders detected. Containment required now. Cordelia's jaw tightened as she reached for the secure line. I braced myself, heart pounding. This was the moment we proved our partnership in the fire of crisis. And beyond those doors, an invisible enemy was already moving to claim our Empire's heart. A leather portfolio landed with soft authority between us. Gold foil letters spelled Executive Fellow. My breath caught at the scope of her ask. This was no rescue. It was an invitation to change the world. The leather portfolio sat between us like a silent ultimatum. Its weight seemed to tilt the air itself, pulling me toward choices I'd never imagined I would face. Cordelia slid it across the marble surface, her expression calm, but her eyes carrying urgency. Outside, the glass towers glittered in the morning sun, but inside, the world had narrowed to the desk, the document, and the thrum of my pulse. "Open it," she said simply. I hesitated, fingertips brushing the smooth hide before unlatching the flap. Inside lay thick parchment sheets, each heavy enough to feel like destiny. At the top, in gold-foiled print, the words Executive Fellow Agreement shimmered. Beneath them, stretched paragraphs of legal clauses, promises, and traps woven into careful language. I read aloud, the words clumsy in my mouth. Equity grants, non-compete clauses, confidentiality terms. The language was foreign, yet I understood enough to know the stakes. Stock units worth more than I could dream of, paired with risks that could exile me from any future outside this company. Cordelia watched silently, her presence unshakable. "Why me?" I asked, voice cracking. "I'm no executive. I'm barely scraping by." Her gaze softened, though her tone remained steady. "Because last night, on that highway, you didn't see a CEO. You saw a human being. You offered me warmth, trust, compassion, things money can't buy. That is what I need beside me now." The memory struck hard. I remembered the frost in her hair, the tremor in her hands as she held the steaming tea. I hadn't thought then of power or position. I had only seen a person in need. And now that same person was offering me entry into a world I could never have reached on my own. I leafed through more pages. The contract was binding, precise, every line a tether. I could almost feel it tightening around me as my eyes traced the signature line at the bottom. My chest tightened. "You don't have to sign," Cordelia said, as though reading my hesitation. "But if you do, you step into more than a job. You step into a partnership, a fight, a future." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. I thought of my life. Overdue bills, long shifts, nights I fell asleep counting coins. And I thought of hers. Empires built and stolen, betrayal from within, the weight of millions depending on her resilience. When I opened my eyes, resolve had replaced doubt. I picked up the pen lying across the folder. My hand trembled, but I pressed it to the page, etching my name onto the line. Every stroke felt like a bridge, one that burned behind me even as it carried me forward. Cordelia exhaled, relief flickering across her features. She extended her hand. "Welcome aboard." Our handshake sealed more than paper. It sealed trust forged in a storm, now formalized in the heart of power. But before the moment could settle, alarms shattered the stillness. Red lights strobed across the office, painting the walls in violent pulses. The polished calm of the boardroom fractured into chaos. Cordelia moved instantly, activating a hidden console behind her desk. A wall of monitors slid into view, streams of code flashing, alerts screaming across the display. Data center compromised. Immediate response required. Camera feeds showed masked intruders storming the subterranean labs, their movements precise, their goal unmistakable, the company's beating heart. Sparks flew as they ripped drives from servers, systems crashing in cascades of failure. Cordelia's face hardened into resolve. She turned to me, her voice ironclad. "You're not just a witness anymore. You're my executive, fellow. And this is where your journey truly begins." Adrenaline surged through me. The contract still lay on the desk, its golden letters gleaming defiantly under the strobe lights. But I no longer saw it as paper. I saw it as a vow. I rose to my feet, meeting her eyes. "Then let's fight." No sooner had I braced myself than the main monitor flickered red. Secondary breach detected. Lab facility. Cordelia's eyes hardened. "They're hitting us where it hurts most." Alarms intensified, drowning out the city's hum. In that instant, our fellowship was forged in crisis, and only action could save everything we'd just pledged to protect. Footsteps echoed in the polished marble hallways as panic rippled through the building like a shockwave. Security doors hissed shut behind locked wings, sealing off corridors in red-lined urgency. Every emergency light pulsed like a frantic heartbeat, painting walls in streaks of warning. We dove headlong into the service stairs. No time to hesitate. No room for fear. The shift from calm to chaos was instant. One moment, Cordelia and I stood in the office under the flashing red alerts. The next, alarms wailed through every corridor of the tower. The polished veneer of power cracked like glass under a hammer, revealing the raw panic beneath. Executives scrambled from their offices, clutching tablets and briefcases as if those objects could shield them from the storm descending upon us. Cordelia didn't hesitate. She grabbed my arm, her voice slicing through the noise. "This way." We plunged into the service stairwell, the heavy fire door groaning shut behind us. Inside, concrete walls closed in, the air sharp with the metallic taste of emergency sprinklers kicking on above. The stairwell vibrated with footsteps, hours and dozens more as staff poured in, eyes wide with fear. On the second landing, smoke leaked in from a cracked doorframe. The acrid burn of tear gas clung to the air. I ripped my scarf, pressing a strip across Cordelia's mouth and nose before covering my own. Her eyes met mine, gratitude flashing briefly before determination hardened them again. "Keep moving," I shouted, guiding her downward. Each step was slick, condensation dripping from pipes overhead. The shriek of alarms reverberated off the concrete, a cruel soundtrack to our descent. By the time we reached the lower data levels, the attack's brutality was laid bare. Server racks lay toppled, sparks leaping from severed cables. Water from the sprinkler system sprayed everything in chaotic bursts, pooling across the floor and sizzling against shorted circuits. The smell of burned plastic and ozone thickened the air. Cordelia scanned the wreckage with the precision of someone used to navigating battlefields, not boardrooms. She crouched near a half-collapsed cabinet, her flashlight beam catching on something small and metallic amid the wreckage. A flash drive, its casing charred, but intact. Shikai seized it with a gloved hand, holding it to her chest as if it were the company's beating heart. "This," she said, breath ragged, "is our last chance. It holds backups, logs, proof of sabotage." My phone buzzed with frantic updates. Intruders spotted on multiple levels, hostages reported near the executive elevator, corridors sealed. The picture was clear. We were trapped inside a siege. Cordelia tucked the drive deep into her coat pocket and straightened. her posture steeled by purpose. "We have to get this out. Nothing else matters if this is lost." We retraced our steps, leading a cluster of terrified assistants and interns. The stairwell trembled with the thunder of boots above, our attackers closing in. On the 7th landing, a steel door blocked our path, sealed shut by the lockdown. My hands fumbled for a multi-tool. Cordelia kept her flashlight steady as I forced the mechanism. With a groan, the lock gave, and we spilled into a corridor lit by pulsing red strobes. Shadows darted across the glass partitions, security agents rushing past, weapons drawn. Their shouts echoed, "Clear left! Secure the breach!" Panic rippled through the building, like fire through dry grass. We ran, every step punctuated by the pounding of my heart. At last, the service elevator came into view. Its panel glowed with error messages, but it still answered when I slammed the call button. The doors slid open with reluctant speed, and we piled in, Cordelia clutching the flash drive as if it were a lifeline. The ride up was suffocating. Each floor we passed flashed glimpses of chaos. Employees herded down corridors, broken glass carpeting office floors, smoke creeping beneath sealed doors. I gripped the railing, sweat mingling with the cold spray dripping from the ceiling. Cordelia stood silent, her gaze fixed on the elevator doors, every muscle taut with resolve. When the doors finally opened onto the lobby, the scale of the attack hit full force. Smoke curled through the vaulted space, mingling with the strobe of red lights. Emergency crews shepherded civilians toward glass exits where security SUVs waited with engines running. Overhead, a helicopter's blades churned the air, its spotlight cutting through drifting haze. Cordelia didn't pause. She strode forward, issuing sharp commands into her comms. Form a perimeter. Clear a path to extraction. Protect the evidence at all costs. Her voice carried authority that cut through the panic, and people obeyed instantly. We sprinted through the lobby, boots slapping against slick marble, hearts racing. Every second felt like a countdown to disaster. And still, beyond the glass doors, I could see searchlights sweeping the night sky, a reminder that the enemy wasn't done. At last, we reached the waiting SUV. Cordelia slid into the back, pulling the flash drive from her coat and slotting it into a secure reader. Its screen lit with a single message. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 initiated. My phone buzzed at the same moment with a coded alert. Rendezvous at rooftop helipad. I looked at her, and she looked at me. The battle inside the corridors was only the beginning. Cordelia slid the flash drive into a secure reader as the SUV sped into the night, her eyes steely with resolve. They won't know what hit them. My phone buzzed with a coded alert. Phase 2 initiated. Rendezvous at the rooftop helipad. The engine roared, carrying us toward new heights of danger and opportunity. Our journey was far from over, and the sky above beckoned with the promise of both salvation and reckoning. Engines growled as our convoy slipped onto the rain-slick streets, tires hissing in protest. Headlights carved through sheets of water, illuminating concrete monsters that loomed like sentinels. She slid into the lead SUV, unshakable amid sirens and storm, eyes fixed on the road ahead. I strapped in beside her, pulse in overdrive, every nerve ready for what lay beyond the rain-drenched horizon. The city had transformed under midnight rain into a shadowed labyrinth. Roads gleamed black, every puddle reflecting fractured images of neon signs and street lamps shivering in the storm. Our convoy of armored SUVs merged from the underground garage like a fleet of ghosts, engines rumbling with restrained ferocity. I sat in the passenger seat of the scout vehicle, rain battering the windshield so hard it seemed determined to blind us. Cordelia rode in the lead SUV just ahead, her silhouette rigid in command, shoulders squared despite the chaos consuming her empire. The hum of encrypted radios crackled between vehicles, a lifeline threading us together in the storm. Route Bravo engaged. Cordelia's voice filtered through the comms, calm yet urgent. All eyes forward. Stay tight. Her words steadied me, though my hand still trembled as I checked the counter-drone jammer mounted on our dash. Its low hum confirmed it was active, creating a protective bubble against enemy surveillance. Still, every flash of lightning above felt like an eye searching us out, every shadow on the roadside a threat waiting to strike. Behind us, 2 more SUVs flanked the convoy, their headlights cutting through curtains of rain. I kept glancing into the rearview mirror, half expecting masked pursuers to emerge from the storm with weapons blazing. The GPS on our dash blinked red waypoints, industrial back roads that twisted through container fields and deserted warehouses. The storm muffled the city's usual clamor, leaving only the growl of engines, the slap of wipers, and the pounding of my heartbeat. Cordelia's voice again. Lights off. Go dark. Obediently, we killed our beams, plunging into near blackness. Only the faint glow of brake lights ahead guided us. It was like navigating through the belly of the storm itself, trusting her voice and the rhythm of engines around me. The convoy slowed as we entered the shipping yard. Stacks of containers rose like towers, shadows swallowing us whole. Water streamed down their rusted sides, pooling in trenches between them. Somewhere in the maze, our target waited. Stolen drives hidden in a dock facility, evidence of sabotage we could not afford to lose. We rolled to a halt, engines silenced. The rain's hiss filled the air. My breath fogged the window as I scanned the shadows. Nothing moved but water. Yet I felt eyes everywhere. Cordelia emerged from her SUV, rain sheeting down her coat. She raised a hand, signaling silence, then gestured toward a shuttered warehouse dock. 2 guards leaned casually near the entrance, cigarettes glowing like tiny beacons in the dark. They had no idea what was coming. Cordelia moved like a phantom, precise and efficient. I followed close, my boots splashing softly in puddles. In seconds, the guards were disarmed. No gunfire, no alarm, just 2 stunned men blinking in shock as Cordelia's team secured them. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with oil and rust. A metal case sat wedged between crates, blinking faint red. Cordelia pried it open, revealing rows of encrypted drives, our prize. Her gloved fingers lingered on them a moment before tucking them safely into her vest. The comms crackled suddenly. Approaching headlights, southern perimeter. Panic spiked in my chest. Cordelia snapped a command. Fall back to vehicles, now. We sprinted through the rain, every step echoing in the cavernous container yard. Just as we slid back into the SUVs, beams of light exploded behind us. Rival vehicles, sleek, black, armored, burst into pursuit, engines howling like predators unleashed. Engines on, move, Cordelia barked. Our convoy roared to life, tires spinning across the flooded asphalt. Bullets sparked off container walls as mercenaries opened fire, their spotlights pinning us in glaring white. I gripped the dash as our driver swerved hard, fishtailing around a corner. Cordelia's SUV blazed ahead, unflinching even as rounds ricocheted off its armor. Rain and gunfire blurred into chaos. My every nerve screamed, yet Cordelia's voice cut through with iron steadiness. North exit. Hold formation. Scout, lead us through. Our vehicle surged forward, leading the convoy through a narrow overpass slick with water. The guardrails loomed inches from our tires, and one wrong turn would send us into the river below. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the storm-tossed water, and for a moment the whole world felt suspended between survival and ruin. I swallowed hard, hands braced against the dash. Cordelia's SUV followed with flawless precision, headlights ghosting through spray. Behind us, enemy vehicles skidded, their gunfire muffled by the roar of storm. We burst free of the container maze, engines screaming, convoy intact. Ahead, a deserted dock facility loomed, the extraction point. Cordelia's voice came over comms, firm and resolute. Secure the rendezvous. 60 seconds. As we rolled to a halt outside the shuttered dock, The rain hammered harder, drumming against steel and glass like war drums. An open hatch gaped ahead, promising either salvation or ambush. Cordelia checked her watch, her words low but edged with urgency. "We don't have time to wait." And then, footsteps, dozens of them, closing in. We skidded to a halt outside a shuttered dock facility, engines cutting to silence in the pounding rain. No guards remained, only the echo of our own footsteps and a single open hatch yawning before us. Cordelia checked her watch, voice low but urgent. "We have 60 seconds. Then the docks came alive, with booted footsteps, reinforcements closing in from every side. Floodlights cut harsh shadows between steel pillars, turning the dockyard into an otherworldly battlefield. Rifles gleamed as figures in black tactical gear advanced, each movement choreographed with lethal intent. She stepped forward, arms raised in a gesture of peace, unwavering in poise and purpose. In that electric moment, words and bullets vied for power, and only our next move would decide which one. The dockyard stretched before us like a stage set for war. Rainwater pooled in wide cracks, turning the concrete into reflective mirrors for the blazing floodlights above. Towering cranes loomed overhead, their rusted arms frozen in mid-swing like metallic giants keeping silent watch. Our convoy stood in a tight semicircle, engines idling, their headlights throwing long beams into the haze. Opposite us, a squad of 8 masked operatives advanced in flawless formation. Their black tactical gear glistened under the rain, rifles steady, boots slapping in unison. Every step radiated discipline and menace. My throat tightened. We were cornered between the steel labyrinth of shipping containers and the merciless sea. Cordelia moved first. She didn't draw a weapon. She didn't retreat. She stepped forward, rain plastering strands of hair to her face, arms rising slowly in an unmistakable gesture of peace. Her voice carried across the space, cutting through the storm. "Stop. We don't have to end this with blood." Her words seemed to echo off the steel pillars, challenging the inevitability of violence. I stood just behind her, tense, ready to lunge for cover if the rifles fired. My every instinct screamed danger, yet watching her stride into the open with such calm sent a strange surge of pride through me. The squad halted 10 yards away. Their leader, taller than the rest, lowered his weapon fractionally. The floodlight caught the emblem on his shoulder, a rival conglomerate's crest, one whispered about in rumors of corporate espionage. "You have something we want," his voice boomed through a modulator. "Hand it over, and your people live." Cordelia tilted her chin, unwavering. "You want the drives. We have them, but you don't get them by slaughtering innocents." Silence. Rain pattered, louder, filling the gap between words. I felt my pulse pound as the commander gestured, and 2 of his men stepped forward with a sleek tablet. They scanned the air, waiting for proof of what we carried. Cordelia reached into her coat and withdrew the black case containing the drives. For a heartbeat, I feared she'd surrender everything. Instead, she placed it atop the hood of our lead SUV, where it gleamed under the harsh light like a jewel in the mud. The rival operatives paused. Their commander gestured again. A subordinate approached cautiously, swiping the tablet to verify encryption signatures. Green lights flickered one by one. Confirmation. Cordelia's voice cut the silence again. "You have your proof. Now honor your word. My people walk free." The commander regarded her for a long moment. Rain dripped off his mask, every droplet sparkling under the floodlight. Finally, he extended his hand. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight like a treaty signed under fire. Cordelia stepped forward, meeting him halfway. Their hands clasped, leather glove against glove, as thunder cracked above. I felt my breath hitch. Somehow she had turned a battlefield into a negotiation table. When the handshake ended, the commander nodded curtly. His men lowered their weapons, creating a corridor of uneasy truce. Relief rippled through our ranks. Nervous, fragile, but real. But then, as if fate refused to let us breathe, the commander's second stepped forward. From his coat he produced a sealed dossier stamped with a wax crest I recognized instantly. One of the darkest subsidiaries in the corporate underworld. He tossed it onto Cordelia's palm with calculated precision. "Next target," he said flatly. Cordelia froze. I leaned closer, heart racing as she cracked the seal. Inside lay coordinates, printed stark on white paper. The location was unmistakable. A remote research facility buried in the Arctic North. A place whispered about in rumors. Experiments at the edge of science. Projects too secret even for shareholders to know. Cordelia's jaw tightened. The rain seemed colder now, slicing down like knives. The fragile peace was already shifting into a new battleground. I swallowed hard, realizing what the dossier meant. Tonight had been about survival. Tomorrow would be about something far larger. Engines revved as our convoy prepared to move. Cordelia slipped the dossier into her coat, her gaze fixed on the storm-drenched horizon. I saw it then, the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had carried us from that snowy highway into the heart of corporate war. She was already thinking ahead, beyond this truce, into the crucible waiting at the edge of the world. As the rain thundered on steel, Cordelia slid the dossier into her coat pocket, her gaze steely with determination. "No time to hesitate," she whispered. Behind us, the commander's form dissolved into the darkness, leaving only the echo of his smirk. We mounted our convoy, engines growling like beasts unleashed, and steered toward the Arctic coordinates, our next crucible in the storm. Candle-lit boardroom, screens flickering, urgent meeting across the far wall. Executives snapped to attention. No scripts, no forgiveness for failure. Her stride toward the podium commanded silence. I felt my heart drum in my chest. The world beyond those windows held its breath, awaiting our next move. The boardroom of Vance Industries had always been a stage for strategy and power, but that night, it felt more like a war council. The long mahogany table gleamed under dim lights, candles flickering as backup generators fought against the blackout caused by the siege. On the far wall, massive screens glowed with urgent red letters. Emergency session. All directors present. Executives filed in, their faces pale, eyes darting like cornered prey. Some carried sleek tablets filled with figures and forecasts. Others gripped documents as if numbers could shield them from the storm outside. Their whispers filled the air. Questions about losses, speculation about betrayal, fear disguised as anger. Then Cordelia entered. The murmurs died instantly. Her presence was a current that shifted the room's atmosphere. Shoulders straight, jaw set, every step of her heels on the polished floor echoed like a verdict. She didn't pause until she stood at the podium at the table's head, her gaze sweeping across the faces of her board. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice calm but unyielding. "You all know why we're here. Last night, Vance Industries was attacked. Our servers were compromised, our people endangered, and our name dragged into the shadows." The room stiffened, as though her words alone pressed down on them. She clicked a remote. The screens behind her lit with security footage, masked intruders storming data cores, sparks leaping from cut wires, armed standoffs in the rain-drenched dockyards. Gasps filled the boardroom. Some executives leaned forward, jaws slack. Others crossed their arms, bracing themselves against undeniable truth. Cordelia continued, her voice gaining fire. "This is no longer a question of profits or quarterly reports. This is survival, and survival requires more than secrecy. It requires truth." A murmur of dissent rippled down the table. The CFO, his face pinched with worry, spoke first. "If we disclose this breach, the markets will punish us. Stockholders will flee. We'll lose billions overnight." Cordelia met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "If we hide the truth, we lose something far greater. We lose trust, and trust once gone cannot be bought back with money. I stood at her side, my pulse thundering. Without planning it, I stepped forward. "I was there," I said, my voice trembling at first but finding strength with every word. "I saw the intruders. I saw our servers burn. And I saw Cordelia put herself in harm's way to protect not just data, but people. This wasn't a financial inconvenience. It was a war on our integrity. And we survived because she chose compassion and courage." The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes locked onto me, a stranger in their midst, jeans still damp from rain. I shouldn't have belonged there, yet my words carried weight because they were truth, stripped bare of corporate polish. Cordelia nodded at me once, a subtle acknowledgement, before turning back to her board. "You've heard it from him. Now hear it from me. We have two options. We can retreat, patch the holes quietly, and hope no one notices. Or we can lead by example. We can show the world that when we were tested, we chose honesty over convenience. We can rebuild stronger, transparent, untouchable debate erupted. Voices rose, overlapping, some furious at the idea of public admission, others tentatively agreeing. Charts flashed across screens, predictions of plunging stock prices, projections of reputational damage. But alongside them, Cordelia pulled up new models: long-term growth, renewed client trust, an empire stronger because it stood on truth. Gradually, her vision spread like fire. One by one, executives leaned forward, nodding, persuaded not by fear, but by her resolve. When she finally called for a vote, hands rose around the table, all but one. The gavel struck wood with a heavy crack. The reform charter passed. Relief surged in my chest. In that room, lit by flickering candles, we had witnessed more than a corporate decision. We had witnessed a coup of principles, a reclamation of ethics in a world that often discarded them. Cordelia had not just defended her empire, she had redefined it. But victory was fleeting. Cordelia's phone vibrated on the podium. She glanced at the alert, her jaw tightening. Slowly, she lifted her gaze, and the fire in her eyes shifted into steel. She held the screen up for us to see. "Offshore facility under attack. Eclipse platform. Breach." The boardroom's triumphant air collapsed into stunned silence. The war wasn't over. It was spreading. Cordelia dropped the phone onto the table like a gauntlet. "This meeting is adjourned. Secure your departments. The next battle has already begun." I felt my chest constrict as the executives scrambled, their faces pale with new fear. Cordelia's gaze found mine, her expression resolute. Without speaking, I knew what her eyes said. "We're not done yet." As the room shifted back into emergency mode, Cordelia tapped her phone. "Secure the perimeter. Meet me at the helipad in 5. My heart leapt as I caught the final word of the alert. Eclipse platform. Critical R&D. Rain hammered the windows, each drop a ticking clock toward our next crisis. We had won the boardroom. Now we raced to defend our future again. Dawn's light revealed camera crews swarming our plaza like seagulls at first light. Flashbulbs popped as she stepped to the podium. Every burst a heartbeat in my chest. My role shifted in an instant. From rescuer in rain-soaked streets to spokesperson under hot lights. Together, we faced the world's gaze with unflinching honesty, armed only with our truth. The night of fire, alarms, and boardroom battles had barely ended when the first rays of morning pushed through the storm. By the time Cordelia and I stepped outside Vance Tower, the plaza was already besieged, not by masked operatives this time, but by reporters. Vans lined the curbs, satellite dishes angled toward the sky, cameras hoisted on shoulders like rifles aimed at us. The flashbulbs hit instantly. Dozens, then hundreds, blinding white bursts that made the night's lightning feel tame. Questions volleyed like gunfire. "Ms. Vance, is it true your systems were breached? Who's responsible for the attack? Will your clients pull out?" Cordelia didn't flinch. She walked to the podium erected on the plaza steps, her posture tall, her tailored suit immaculate despite the sleepless night. I followed close, heart pounding so hard it felt like another microphone in my chest. When she reached the podium, silence fell, as if even the cameras were holding their breath. She spoke clearly, her voice warm but firm. "Good morning. Last night, Vance Industries faced its greatest challenge in decades. We were attacked, our data centers targeted, our staff put in danger, our reputation threatened. But we did not fall," the words rolled out like a tide, steady, unstoppable. Murmurs spread among the press, but no one interrupted. She continued, "We could choose secrecy, but we will not. Transparency is our policy, integrity our foundation. We stand here not to hide, but to lead." The crowd buzzed. Some reporters scribbled furiously, others aimed boom mics closer, hungry for every syllable. And then she did something I hadn't expected. She stepped back and motioned me forward. I froze, stunned. Me? In front of a world that barely knew my name? But her eyes, steady and encouraging, left no room for retreat. My feet carried me forward. I gripped the podium, the wood slick with condensation. My voice cracked at first, but found strength as I spoke. "I was there last night," I said. "On the highway, when she was just a stranger in the storm. In the data center, when we fought to save the last drive. In the corridors, when panic threatened to consume us. And in those moments, she never abandoned her people. She chose courage, humanity, and truth." The plaza hushed, then erupted in a chorus of camera clicks. My words weren't corporate polish, they were raw, lived truth, and the crowd recognized it. Cordelia stepped forward again, reclaiming the mic. "You heard him. You heard us. Today we launch initiatives not just for recovery, but for the future. Relief funds for affected families, community training programs, and new transparency protocols. We will not just rebuild. We will set the standard for an industry that, too, often hides in shadows. Screens behind us lit up with hashtags already trending. #, Vance Resilience, #, Truth in Leadership, #, Dawn After Storm. Live feeds spread our words across continents in seconds. For once, the narrative wasn't being written by rivals. It was being written by us. Applause rippled, not just from employees standing at the edges of the crowd, but from ordinary citizens who had come to see what courage looked like. For the first time in hours, hope glimmered like the rising sun. But then, the fragile calm broke. Cordelia's tablet buzzed in her hand. She glanced down, her expression tightening instantly. Her lips barely moved as she whispered 2 words to me. "Hostages taken." A chill surged through me. She turned back to the cameras, her face composed, but I could see the storm raging behind her eyes. Without offering more to the crowd, she closed the conference with a final line. "We will continue to stand." Always then, she stepped down from the podium and strode quickly to the waiting SUV. I followed, ignoring the reporters shouting frantic questions. The air seemed to grow colder as we slipped inside. "Dock 12, she said to her driver. "Families of our contractors. Leverage." The vehicle lurched into motion. My chest tightened at the thought. After everything we had survived, the enemy had found a new weapon. Not data, but people. As the convoy peeled away from the plaza, the cheers and flashbulbs faded, replaced by the wail of distant sirens. Dawn's promise of calm had already shattered. We were racing headlong into another crucible. Cameras faded behind us, replaced by the distant wail of sirens at Dock 12. Cordelia's voice crackled over the comms. "Prepare for a hot extraction. Time is running out." Rain began to fall again, each drop a metronome ticking toward crisis. In the gray promise of morning, we steered toward danger. One more mission awaited. Foghorns mourned across the harbor as spotlights scanned restless waters. Shipping containers loomed like silent witnesses, stacked in precarious towers. Gunmetal shadows shifted at the periphery. Hostages bound, guards restless. We crouched behind a forklift, adrenaline and strategy warring in my veins. The harbor was alive with menace. Foghorns groaned across the black water, the sound carrying like laments for sailors lost at sea. Above us, searchlights swept in wide arcs, their beams cutting through the fog and glinting off the wet steel of shipping containers stacked 5 stories high. The air reeked of oil, salt, and tension. Cordelia and I crouched behind a rust-streaked forklift, the concrete beneath us slick with seawater and grease. Around us, her security team formed a loose semicircle, weapons drawn, radios whispering coded instructions. Every movement had to be silent, deliberate. One wrong sound could mean the difference between life and death. Beyond the forklift, the scene unfolded like a nightmare. Families of Vance, contractors, engineers, analysts, technicians were bound near the base of a towering crane. Their wrists tied with coarse rope, their mouths gagged, fear radiating from their wide eyes. Guards in black tactical gear paced around them, rifles hanging casually, but their fingers tense on triggers. 5 guards, possibly more in the shadows, one of Cordelia's men whispered. I counted again, my chest tightening. 6, one near the stairwell to the crane. Cordelia's eyes flicked to me, acknowledging the correction. Even now, in the thick of danger, she carried herself with absolute focus. Her whispered command was steady. We get them out. No casualties, the plan formed in moments. 2 of her men would flank left, using the stacked containers for cover. Another would climb to the gantry above, providing overwatch. Cordelia would advance with me directly toward the hostages, drawing the guards' focus. It was bold, risky, and the only option. We moved. The night swallowed us, rain beginning to patter again, muffling footsteps. I hugged the shadows of containers, heart slamming with every step. The guards shifted, one yawning, another kicking at the wet ground. They didn't know how close we were, how seconds away their advantage was from crumbling. Cordelia signaled. Her hand rose, clenched, then opened. The strike was swift. Overwatch dropped a flash grenade. Light burst across the dock, searing white. Shouts erupted, guards stumbling, blinded. Cordelia and I sprinted forward. My knife cut the first rope, freeing a woman whose tears streaked across her soot-dusted cheeks. Cordelia yanked another hostage to their feet, urging them toward the shadows. Gunfire cracked. The noise ripped across the docks, bullets sparking off steel. I dove, dragging a child behind a stack of crates as rounds tore through the air. Cordelia fired back, each shot precise, controlled. Her men flanked, returning fire with calculated bursts that drove the guards back toward the crane. "Move them now," she shouted, her voice clear even through chaos. One by one, the hostages scrambled into the shadows, herded by our team toward the waiting vans beyond the perimeter. My muscles burned as I pulled another rope free, shielding a trembling man with my body, until he was safe. But the fight wasn't over. The guard near the crane roared into his radio, calling reinforcements. Lights blazed suddenly atop the crane, illuminating the docks in harsh white. New figures poured in. Heavier gear, heavier weapons. Cordelia ducked behind a container, reloading with practiced speed. She tossed me a glance, sharp and urgent. This was never just a hostage play. They wanted us here. The realization sank in cold. The hostages weren't bait. They were the trap. A bullet ricocheted inches from my head, snapping me back into the moment. I pressed against the container wall, lungs burning, adrenaline searing every nerve. Cordelia barked orders into her comms, rallying her team into tighter formation. The hostages were nearly clear, but the enemy had us pinned. Water from the harbor sprayed across the dock as bullets struck the tide, hissing like serpents. I caught Cordelia's eye again, and in her gaze, I saw it. The fire, the refusal to surrender. She leaned close, her voice low but fierce. "We break their line now, or we don't make it out." Before I could respond, a shadow loomed overhead. The crane's cabin door swung open, and a figure stepped out, holding a detonator high for us all to see. His voice carried across the dock, amplified by a speaker clipped to his vest. "You've saved your pawns, Cordelia. But are you ready to sacrifice your queen?" The words sliced the air. The detonator's red light blinked like a ticking heart. Cordelia's jaw clenched. My own breath stalled. The boardroom battles, the convoy chases, the press conference, all of it had led us here. And now the true stakes were revealed. From the crane's shadow, a masked figure raised a detonator, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. Cordelia's face hardened, resolve etched into every line. "We're out of time," she whispered, eyes locking onto mine. The dockyard became a chessboard where one wrong move could sacrifice us all. Our launch carved foaming trails in the moonlit harbor, its twin engines roaring like unleashed beasts. Searchlights pierced the spray and laser beams, as if determined to drag us back into danger. Bullets pinged metal around me while I steered with shuttered vision, trusting instinct over sight. Every surge of speed felt like borrowed time. Life itself hung on each knot we gained. The night sky was a storm of light and shadow, moonbeams fractured by the violent churn of the sea. Our speedboat tore across the harbor like a hunted animal, its engines screaming as though begging for mercy. Behind us, 3 black gunboats fanned out in pursuit, their mounted spotlights sweeping the waves with surgical precision. Each sweep came closer, brushing the stern of our launch before cutting across our bow like a predator's teeth. Cordelia crouched at my side, one hand braced on the rail, her other gripping the comm. Her voice was calm, but carried the steel edge of command. "Starboard 40 now," she ordered, eyes locked on the shifting lights. I jerked the wheel, and the boat tilted violently, spray drenching us as the hull sliced sideways through a cresting wave. My teeth rattled, my shoulders screamed, but the maneuver spared us a volley of gunfire that tore the water where we'd been moments before. Tracers crackled in bright arcs, sizzling as they kissed the sea, painting streaks of death across the harbor. The hostages huddled low behind us, wrapped in blankets, their faces pale with terror. I could hear their gasps over the roar of the engines, could feel their fear pressing against my spine like weight. Each of them was a reason not to falter. Each of them made the Ardouet risk worth it. Cordelia leaned close, her voice dropping so only I could hear. "We blind them again." EMP on my mark, I nodded, yanking the compact sequencer from the locker at my feet. The hum of the coil vibrated against my palm, its power both fragile and immense. "Now," she shouted. I triggered the pulse, and a low thrum rippled out over the water. Instantly, 2 of the gunboats faltered. Their spotlights flickered, sensors fried, engines coughing as if choked by the unseen wave. One spun sideways, slamming broadside into a wake and nearly capsizing. Cheers erupted from the freed hostages, but Cordelia silenced them with a curt gesture. "We're not clear yet." The 3rd gunboat had shielded its systems. Its spotlight remained steady, its engines howling with renewed fury as it closed in. The operator knew we were vulnerable, our EMP drained. A hail of bullets peppered the waves at our bow, forcing me to swerve dangerously close to the breakwater. Concrete pilings loomed ahead, jagged teeth rising from the tide. I clenched the wheel and shoved the throttle forward, skimming so close the hull scraped sparks against stone. The gunboat tried to follow but misjudged the angle. Its stern slammed the barrier, throwing sparks and shrapnel into the night. Still it pressed on, limping but lethal. Cordelia grabbed my shoulder, her eyes fierce in the fractured light. "Head for the convoy! They'll cover us." Through the mist, I glimpsed headlights on the far quay. 3 SUVs lined up like guardian beasts, their beams slicing through the fog. Our salvation lay across open water, but between us and them was a gauntlet of enemy fire. I throttled harder, every nerve screaming as the boat leapt forward. Waves hammered us, salt spray blinding me, but instinct guided my hands where vision failed. Cordelia crouched beside the freed hostages, steadying them, her presence a beacon of control amid chaos. The gunboat surged closer, its spotlight swallowing us. I could see the silhouette of its gunner adjusting for a clean shot. And then, salvation. From the quay, our convoy's SUVs roared to life, their mounted lights flashing, their engines growling as they raced along the dock. Snipers stationed on rooftops fired, bullets streaking across the water. The gunboat's spotlight shattered in an eruption of sparks, plunging us into shadow once more. We were almost there. "Brace," I shouted, and gunned the throttle one last time. The boat vaulted a wave, slammed back into the harbor with bone-jarring force, and skidded into alignment with the dockside ramp. Security agents rushed forward, ropes in hand, pulling us toward shore. Cordelia moved first, lifting a child hostage into waiting arms. I followed, guiding the others onto solid ground. Each step off that launch felt like rebirth, my legs trembling from the storm of adrenaline. Behind us, the last gunboat faltered under sniper fire, its hull riddled with holes, its pursuit broken. Desaldezaz harbor, at last, fell into silence, but for the groan of our engines and the ragged breathing of the saved. Cordelia clutched the flash drive case against her chest, her coat soaked, her hair plastered to her forehead. She looked at me, and in her eyes was that same fire, the refusal to bend, the relentless will to fight on. For a heartbeat, I thought we had won. Then my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. Encrypted alert. Next front. Arctic Research Station under siege. Cordelia read it over my shoulder, lips tightening. The dawn's first light broke across the water, gilding her silhouette in gold and steel. She smiled, weary but fierce. "Pack for Sub-Zero. Departure in 30. Relief melted as my phone vibrated with the Arctic alert. Research station breach. Extreme conditions. Cordelia's eyes gleamed through exhaustion. "Pack for Sub-Zero. Departure in 30. The first rays of sun glinted off the convoy's windshields. Our next mission lay at the edge of the world, and we were already en route. Sunrise bathed the harbor in molten gold and rose, as if the sky itself celebrated our triumph. A cheering crowd lined the docks, waving signs and banners that read, "Thank you, heroes." She clasped my hand next to the podium, and in that instant we were no longer stranger and rescuer, but equal partners. Together, we unveiled the Vanguard Foundation, our shared legacy, to a world hungry for hope. The morning carried a silence I hadn't felt in days, not the silence of fear, nor the heavy pause before gunfire, but the kind that comes with renewal. The hush of waves slapping against wood, the cry of gulls overhead, the rustle of banners in the dawn breeze. Cordelia and I stood side by side on the makeshift stage, gazing out over the gathered crowd. Families we had freed, employees who had fought in the dark corridors, even strangers who had only read the headlines. Hundreds pressed together, their eyes shining with gratitude. Some carried handmade signs, others clutched flowers or photos, but all of them radiated the same unspoken message. "We believe again." When she lifted her hand to clasp mine, the cheer that erupted was like thunder rolling across the sea. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. Not long ago, I had been just another face in the storm, clutching a thermos of tea on a frozen highway. Now, I was standing in front of the world, part of something larger than myself, bound to a woman whose strength had rewritten the future. Behind us, the Vanguard Foundation's banner unfurled, a rising sun cradled by two joined hands. Its meaning was simple but profound, unity forged from compassion, light breaking through the coldest of nights. Cordelia stepped to the podium first. Her voice carried with the same steel I had heard in boardrooms and dockyards, but now it was softened with warmth. "Last night," she began, "we faced darkness. Our company was attacked, Our people were endangered, our very values tested. But today, at dawn, we stand together, not just to celebrate survival, but to build something greater. The crowd roared, but she raised her hand for quiet. Her gaze swept the faces before us, children perched on parents' shoulders, workers in grease-stained uniforms, journalists holding cameras high. The Vanguard Foundation will be more than a corporate arm, she declared. It will be a promise to protect the vulnerable, to invest in communities, to ensure that kindness is never overlooked. Her words struck deep. I remembered the first time I had seen her broken by snow and betrayal, how fragile she had seemed in that storm. To see her now, unshakable, radiant in the morning light. It made my chest ache with pride. When she gestured for me to speak, I hesitated, breath catching in my throat. But the crowd waited, and so I stepped forward. I wasn't a CEO, I said, voice carrying over the water. I wasn't an executive. I was just someone driving home, tired, clutching a cup of tea. I saw a stranger on the side of the road, and I stopped. My voice faltered, but I pressed on. That act, small, unplanned, led us here. It reminds me that legacies aren't written only in boardrooms. They're written in choices. To help, to risk, to trust. The audience stilled, hanging on every word. The Vanguard Foundation will be my choice, I continued. Our choice. To ensure that no storm leaves anyone stranded, no betrayal goes unanswered, and no community feels abandoned. Together, we'll turn compassion into strength. Applause burst like fireworks. Reporters raised microphones, children waved flags, and for a fleeting moment, the harbor looked less like a battlefield and more like a sanctuary. Cordelia reached for the ceremonial scissors, the ribbon stretched taut before us. Our hands met again as we cut it together, the fabric snapping with a sound that seemed to echo into history. The foundation's doors swung open, and the first families stepped inside. Children gasped at the computer labs glowing with opportunity. Parents touched brochures promising job training and relief, and elders smiled as volunteers guided them to free clinics. Every face was alight with possibility. I wandered among them, shaking hands, listening to stories. One woman pressed my hand, tears streaking her cheeks. "You gave us back more than safety," she whispered. "You gave us hope." Cordelia joined me, her expression soft, touched by the lives around us. For once she let herself lean against me, just slightly, the weight of leadership shared instead of carried alone. For the first time in days, I thought maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. And then her tablet buzzed. She glanced down. The crowd still clapped, still cheered, still basked in the warmth of dawn. But her eyes narrowed, jaw tightening as she read the message glowing across the screen. New crisis, Antarctic research, station under siege, lockdown in 60 minutes. The Victory's glow dimmed instantly. She slipped the tablet into her coat, masking her expression. But I had already seen the fire in her gaze, the one that lit whenever the impossible rose before us. She turned to me, her voice low but resolute. "Ice or fire, we answer the call." And I nodded, because by now I understood. Dawn wasn't an ending. It was only the beginning of our shared legacy. As the crowd's cheers faded, Cordelia's tablet pinged with the Antarctic alert once more. Station lockdown in 60 minutes. Her gaze lifted to the endless white beyond the docks. She drew a deep breath, eyes alight with purpose. Ice or fire, we answer the call. And at dawn's edge, our next crucible awaited. Together, as always. If this journey of unexpected heroes and daring rescues captivated you, make sure to hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you'll never miss a single heartbeat of our next adventure. Tap the like button to show your support. Share this video with friends who crave real-life tales of compassion and courage, and drop a comment telling us which moment left you breathless. Your voice helps shape future stories and keeps our community strong.